Hi there, this is Solitary Ronan from Solitary Ronan Films, and welcome to another random review. Today's random review is from 1933, and it is White Woman. What a wonderful title. Starring Carole Lombard and Charles Laughton. Carole Lombard is topped bill. This is a pre-code film from 1933, and if you watch the film, you'll probably be able to tell why. Is this a great film? Possibly not, but it is really strange and really quite interesting. Directed by Stuart Walker, who did Werewolf of London. He also did a Carole Lombard Cary Grant film, which I still haven't seen, but hopefully that will come to Kino Lorber Blu-ray at some point, called The Eagle and Hawk, or The Eagle and the Hawk. And he also did The Mystery of Edwin Drood, starring Claude Rains, but obviously not a name that jumps out at you, even that if that is his real name, Stuart Walker. This is a Kino Lorber Region A Blu-ray, which comes with a commentary by Alan Arkush and film historian Daniel Kremer. It's only 68 minutes. It does feel as though it really should have been an extra 10 minutes long, because there's lots of scenes and very quick transitions that could have been fleshed out a bit more. It's the simple tale of Carole Lombard, who is making money as a singer in a local bar in the tropical islands, because her husband committed suicide, and despite the fact that she says it's because of debts, everybody in society seems to think it was because of her and her potential infidelities, which she denies. And it's the world of plantation owners, and that level of society. It's white ownership of non-white land, essentially, and she can't go to any of the islands as her reputation precedes her. And then Charles Laughton appears doing an English accent. I can't really place it. I guess it's supposed to be the north. It's not a southern English accent, but it's certainly not Yorkshire. It's potentially like Lancashire or something like that, but it's not. The fact that it's the north, I think, is deliberate, so he's not kind of clean money, the insinuation that he's dirty money, and he gives Carole Lombard an option that she could marry him and live in his land. He shows her a map of all this land that he owns, and she would get looked after. Charles Laughton's moustache, as you can kind of see in the cover, his moustache is quite ridiculous. It's one of the most sensational moustaches in cinema history, maybe only beaten by the big black moustache that Christopher Walken's father had in Comfort of Strangers, that you have to imagine. Now I think to some extent there's almost a double standard with Charles Laughton. If another actor chewed scenery sometimes the way Charles Laughton does, people would complain, but we do, well, at least I do, I kind of enjoy Charles Laughton when he's chewing scenery, and in this one he does not chew scenery. He swallows the scenery whole, he devours the scenery, he's doing ticks and rolling his eyes, and it's quite an impressive performance of scenery chewing. So he takes Carole Lombard to his plantation. The white workers, the non-native workers that he has, all have shady pasts, so they can't really go back to civilization, quote unquote. And a couple of them you'll probably recognise their face. It's that guy who's always in those films, and also that, wait a minute, that's that guy. But you'll probably recognise them. But he has a hand, played by Kent Taylor, that immediately Carole Lombard says hello, and he says hello. And again, because the film is only 6 to 8 minutes, it's bang, bang, bang. They want to leave the plantation, but we get an example of one of the other white workers trying to leave the plantation, and what happens to him. I mean, it is almost like an Island of Dr. Moreau in some senses. Obviously Charles Laughton was in Island of Lost Souls, as the people that work for him live in fear and they can't really escape. You've got hostile natives, obviously you've got the wildlife around the place as well. An American turns up, who is basically a sexual predator, and as Kent Taylor is sent away by Laughton, even though to his seeming apparent death, is this other American who turns up, and as I say, is basically a sexual predator, and practically tries to take Carole Lombard by force, using all of his charm with a lowercase c. And then in the end, it kind of climaxes with the natives revolting against Laughton, and the question is whether Carole Lombard and Kent Taylor escape, or they are trapped as well in this life and death struggle at the end of the film. I mean, it's a plot that we've seen plenty of times, but because it's pre-code, it's very strange. There's a chimpanzee that things happen to, which probably couldn't get away with nowadays. Carole Lombard is not wearing a bra throughout the whole film, which is disgusting. And she's wearing lots of kind of open, flimsy dresses and tops. I mean, it's quite shocking. There is actually quite a lot of, not necessarily gore, but quite a lot of extreme violence in it for 1933. It's actually quite shocking. No wonder they needed the Hays Code. I mean, it's practically filth. So you just have this odd little film. Who knows, this might have been the film that forced them to bring the code in, I don't know. So you have Carole Lombard, who's not quite, you know, if you give her to 1935, she's much more assured, and then obviously by the time you get to Be or Not to Be, she is the fully formed Carole Lombard. So she's not quite comfortable. There's a kind of tension in her performance. Maybe it's just because Charles Laughton is just, as he does in quite a lot of films, he's just dominant on the screen with his huge moustache that comes out to here. Probably doesn't help. But again, it is interesting if you have the Carole Lombard Kino Lorber collections, as I do. It is interesting to see her progression, you know, from the early 30s to the mid 30s, late 30s, to kind of see her grow as a performer and a presence. So, I mean, obviously, as I say, the film perhaps isn't a great film, but if you're a Carole Lombard fan, as I am, it's an absolute essential. And if you enjoy seeing Charles Laughton, as I say, swallow the scenery, it's quite an outlandish performance. And again, because it is pre-code, there's some weird stuff that goes on in it. So for its 6 to 8 minutes, it never really gets dull, because there's always some bizarre thing going on. Again, it's about a woman who, just by reputation, his life is changed and ruined, and she essentially has to marry somebody just to get out of the situation, but then she ends up in a worse situation. We never find out why her husband committed suicide, and we don't really need to. It's just a very strange little film, but certainly for me, it's hugely enjoyable. And at the end of the day, if you don't like it, it's over in 6 to 8 minutes. I mean, hopefully Carole Lombard get around to releasing pretty much every Carole Lombard film. For somebody who died so tragically young, she still does have a lot of films that aren't available, or certainly aren't on Blu-ray. And as I said, she did The Eagle and The Hawk, directed by Stuart Walker, co-starring Cary Grant, so that should be next on the list for Kino, surely. So thanks very much for watching this very random review of White Woman, which again is perhaps not the greatest title in the world. It would be fascinating to see this film made in 1935, after the Hays Code came in 1934. But this is the tail end of the decadence before the Hays Code slammed it down, because there's no way Lombard would get away with wearing what she wears in this. They wouldn't have got away with the violence in the film, which almost borders on gore, to be honest. It's just a fascinating little film, and again, Carole Lombard is just so underrated. Again, because their extras are somewhat hit and miss, but the actual films that they release, and certainly they're, as I am now, 4K aware, as they say in the business, their 4K titles are really knocking out at the park as well. So Carole Lombard do need a bit more attention. Plus, their cases are really thin, so you can get more on them, more of them on a shelf. So that's an advantage as well. So thanks very much for watching this, as I say, extremely random review of White Woman. Please let me know in the comments below if you've seen White Woman, not A White Woman, the film White Woman. And hopefully you'll join me again for more random reviews. This is Saul Ronan from Saul Ronan Films, saying farewell.